Good evening and welcome to Posthumous Poetry Series Part 42. A while back, a couple months ago, last month, something like that, uh, Pittsburgh poet Michael Worster was introducing me to someone, and he said about me, he is the progenitor of the poetry scene in Pittsburgh. And of course, what he meant by that was that I was the creator of the poetry scene in Pittsburgh, which is a wonderful compliment. There was When I moved to the city, there was poetry going on, but there wasn't a community. It was very disjunct. There was an over influence of the university. There was an over influence of the International Poetry Forum here. And the poets were all scattered in their own little groups, but there was no sense of community. And in my mind, when I moved here, I said to myself that if I'm going to live here, we're going to have a poetry scene. And even if I have to do it myself, which I did. I was a good little organizer even prior to that, growing up in high school. I did a lot of stuff like that. So that began the golden age of poetry in Pittsburgh, of which I will say I was the creator of the golden age of Pittsburgh, of poetry in Pittsburgh. The first thing I did was I became, as it is now, the first and only poetry director for the Three Rivers Arts Festival. And I created the first opportunity for poets in Pittsburgh to be recognized in the community as actual functioning artists and artists that got paid for their work, and the readings were balanced racially and they were balanced sexually. It was always a guy and a girl reading on the same stage, and including all the races and stuff like that. Because Pittsburgh is a big racist city, and it still continues to be that way. And there was exclusion that way, not consciously. I don't even think. Just people weren't getting together. So I did that to begin with. I did the Three Rivers Arts Festival and began my span in the city as that person who was creating something that wasn't university related, that wasn't related to these jewelry jangling programs like the International Poetry Forum. And I also, of course, was writing poetry, and at that particular time when I was writing poetry, I was also under the influence of Monty Python, and still am, and John Cleese, of course. And John Cleese, there was an episode on Monty Python um, called The International Communist Conspiracy. I don't know if you remember that. I'm sorry. But in the National Communist Conspiracy, of course, they were looking out for the Russians. They hated the commies, and John Cleese had this scene where he just like goes off to almost his head explodes about how much he hated communists, and I thought that was real funny. And it was still at the time when we were in fear of the Russians, and the Russians were in fear of us, and it kept going on, and there was no surcease to that situation. And I liked his character so much that I didn't really consciously say I was going to write a John Cleese poem, but as it turns out, I did write a John Cleese poem. And as I mentioned briefly before, I wanted it to be really outrageous, and I wanted it to, um, bother people a little bit too. As I said, Pittsburgh is a racist city, and it wasn't uncommon when I first moved here to be standing on a corner and have some white guy waiting at the bus with you who would just start railing against black people and using the word nigger with, look at those niggers and things like that. So I thought, wow, that's I should incorporate something like that in my poem too. Throw some racism in it while throwing in some what if the what is some communism. I may as well throw in some racism at the same time and stuff. So I wrote this poem called "What If the Russians," and you'll see what it's about in a minute. But the thing was, as I say, I was the poetry director for Theories Arts Festival. I also read at the festival, and I read this poem at the festival. And when I read this poem at the festival, when I finished reading the poem at the festival, the police appeared at the stage, and they said to me, "Come here a minute." While in the middle of my reading, they said, "Who's in charge here?" And I said, "Well, I am." And they said, "Well, you better change your script right now, or else you're going to jail." I said, usually, I was a little buzzed. I said, "What?" They said children had called them on the phone and were complaining about my poetry. You have to remember this is pre-cell phone time, so a kid would have to have gone to like a payphone or something. And I said, "Change your script. You're going to go to jail." And everybody in the audience was booing, and it was a really wonderful moment at the festival. And a lot of poets pretend that they are radicals and they are outrageous, but they can never strike that chord to actually incite the police to want to arrest you. It was one of the most comical moments of my life. It was one of the funniest moments of my life. And I thought that we're 42 poems into this adventure that we're having, and I don't think it would be complete if I didn't read this poem. And it's not a long poem, but it's a really wonderfully comically, you know, outrageous poem, and I hope somebody from Monty Python's sitting somewhere in the world and stumbles upon this tonight, because this is my tribute to Monty Python and the international communist conspiracy and racism in America. The, the poem is called "What If the Russians?" What if the Russians come into Wendy's while we are eating and rip open your blouse and begin sucking your tits and toss me depanced on the salad bar, sprigging you atop me, ordering in chopped American, "If you wish to save your worthless drivel of an existence, then you will do it like the capitalist dogs you are. What if I mistake as creamy Italian dripping down my leg is actually my ejaculata inside you, while those filthy communist bastards jack off on American flags they all carry in their pocket, and what makes me puke is these wimps who want to nix the nuke. Remember, it'll be worse than the niggers."